see the terrain build, then you can jet on out of there. But you shouldn't, because he's a great character, and you should watch the whole video because he's hilarious, and I love him. Trent, will you marry me? In a day and age where people...
While I was certainly flattered, I did have to decline Scott's offer. Instead, we did the next best thing we could think of, which was a terrain deathmatch. So, Scott, please explain the rules.
The rules of the engagement are as follows. Each entrance submission must be based on the theme of hell. Each entrance submission must only be 20 cm in diameter. Each entrance submission must be complete on July 10th, which gives him 6 days to complete the challenge. No more, no less.
So, I had a lot of ideas with the theme of hell in mind. I wanted to make something that looked like it was straight out of a Bosch painting, something weird and conceptual. But after hitting some dead ends, I thought, why not just make something fun? And nothing says hell and fun better than id Software's Doom. After looking through some of Doom's concept art, I loved the idea of making the icon of sin. But due to some limitations in our deathmatch rules, I couldn't make anything too big. So I thought, let's make it smaller and put it on a floating island. So, let's get building. XPS foam is a real pain to work with if you don't have a hot wire cutter, but for making rocky texture, it's awesome. I started by removing large amounts of material, and I slowly refined the texture over time. I think the small details are what really sell the final piece and bring it to life. By using a wire brush and cutting out fine chunks with a scalpel, it really added a sense of scale to everything. I spent a lot of time shaping the rock little by little, and each process was really therapeutic. And just looking at this footage, I clearly needed it. To work out where to go next, I did some designing on the computer. That way I could make mistakes and test things out quickly. I really liked this goat skull model, and I really wanted to recreate it into something tangible. Now, I could have just 3D printed this skull and cleaned it up and it would look great, but I don't find that process very fun and I want to get my hands dirty. So I found this free program by Autodesk. It's called Slicer, and it slices up 3D models into flat layers. I can then transfer those layers onto foam board and assemble them. It's sort of like a really thick 3D print. I refined the skull shape using a knife and sandpaper, and then I used 2-part modeling epoxy to sculpt on top of it. I intentionally left the surfaces sort of rough and unrefined, and that sort of created an aged and dry bone appearance. The horns were a bit tricky, and I did a lot of experimenting to get the shape right. I used aluminium foil and covered them in superglue and bicarb soda, which made an awesome texture, but also made them super strong. In my 3D mockup, the glitchy abstract wall made for a really cool effect, but I couldn't find a way of executing it with real materials. Nothing I tried really looked good, so in my head I brainstormed some new ideas before I went with this. And that didn't really work either, so that turned into this. The island obviously needed a pentagram, otherwise how else would you know it's in hell? So I printed an image from Doom and I traced it onto the surface. The freehand looked great on the big pentagram, but really bad on the small stuff. But that's okay, I'll fix it later. This foam holds impressions really well, so to get a rock texture, I just rolled some stones on the surface. I wanted the piece to feel a bit more foreboding, so I sculpted a little stone for the skull to be propped up against. Now when my adventurers teleport onto the floating island, they can look death right in the eyes, or lack thereof. To base coat the island, I added a tiny amount of dishwashing liquid to some watered down cheap paint. The dishwashing liquid helps break the surface tension in the paint and helps it seep into all the little gaps from the wire brush. The rest of the paint was all just dry brushing and washes. My favourite effect on the skull is the little touches of green wash. It really made it look aged and gave it needed character. I didn't really like how the small details on the pentagram came out, so after the paint job I covered all those bits in PVA glue and sand, and then I started again with the same paint scheme. I made a quick base using the techniques from my lava terrain tutorial, and then I just called it a day. Well, for a bit. I decided I didn't like it and I experimented with a new base, which I soon gave up on, and worked on a different base, which I didn't like. And then I went back to the original base and tidied it up a bit and decided I actually did like it. To make the island float, I stuck a skewer in the base and in the bottom of the island, and then I was done with a couple of hours to spare. I really like this piece, and I learned so many new skills and techniques that I'm going to use in the future. At the start of this project, I was really passionate about winning and proving my place, and I really wanted to have a deathmatch with Scott because I really look up to him. This is a man that grinds around the clock to make good content, and is so determined to better himself with each video. After the excitement of the first day, I didn't care so much about the competition. I just love the camaraderie of building something with a friend. The late night calls with Scott went from talking about the video we were going to make to talking about why we make videos and then how we can make our videos better. I think both our videos set out to be about the competition and who was better, but I think both our videos turned into something else. I'm not sure who won, and I'm sure you can let us know, but I really want to take a moment to thank Scott for being a part of this. This was really fun.